Hi, I'm Robert, an OCD coach who has struggled with OCD himself. Today I'm going to be talking about something that's come up for me personally and that I know a lot of people can struggle with, particularly in the winter, and that is when you get sick and you also struggle with OCD. You're already feeling exhausted, tired, maybe you're stuck in bed, and then the OCD actually cranks up as well. Suddenly the intrusive thoughts can feel much harder to deal with because you have less energy and you're really struggling with congestion and just feeling generally very bad. So today's episode is all about helping you to realize that there's things that you can do even when you're feeling really run down. Perhaps you have the flu, perhaps you have a cold and you're not feeling good. So stick around because I'm going to be sharing some tips, and I really hope that you enjoy. So for the last week or so, I've had this really awful flu. Normally when I get these kinds of things, they don't bother me too much. Obviously I feel really bad. I can feel congested and less energy. But this particular one was a really nasty flu, and it really kind of knocked me sideways for a while last week. And I was really struggling with my energy and also with low mood. Now, obviously, I speak about dealing with anxiety. That's something that I have always struggled with throughout my life, but low mood isn't something that I normally struggle with so much. And of course, when you get that and you're trying to carry on with your life as normal, but actually you're feeling much lower, you're finding it very difficult to focus. You're finding it very difficult to find energy. It can be incredibly complicated and difficult to just carry on as normal. And actually that is what the world kind of tends to expect from us. The world doesn't tend to care if you're not feeling 100%. The world just wants you to be productive, as always. Your family wants you to show up. Your friends expect you to still go to the social events. And maybe you don't actually feel like doing any of that because actually you're feeling awful. You don't have that same energy you would normally have. And on top of that, you also struggle with OCD. And to be honest, last week when I was really struggling with this, the OCD was a little bit harder to deal with. When intrusive thoughts would come up, I would find myself fighting with them a bit more than usual. I would find myself kind of going down a few rabbit holes when actually I didn't need to. And that's because my energy was much, much lower. And I was finding it harder to find the resources that I needed in order to manage the OCD effectively as I normally do. And not only this, but a lot of my coping strategies are based around things that I can do when I'm feeling healthy. And so, unfortunately, when you take away things like exercise, that's really a kind of foundation for me. When I'm able to exercise, it helps me to manage my anxiety and my stress. It helps me to connect myself with nature. And it generally makes me feel better about myself. If I go for a run, it clears my head. It can help me to concentrate more. And all of these things are obviously really beneficial when it comes to managing OCD. So that was completely out the window for me. Not only that, but the Wim Hof method, something I speak about quite a lot on this podcast. I'm not going to be getting into an ice bath if I have a fever or if I'm feeling really bad. It's just not a good idea. It's not healthy, obviously. So I'm not going to be able to do an ice bath during that time, and I'm not going to get the benefit of that. I'm not going to do Wim Hof breathing during that time because it's too much of a powerful breath work. And to be honest, my lungs they really weren't up to the job of it. And so, in these situations, we have to find a different way of kind of finding our way through. And that's what I've been up to for the last week. After reflecting on this situation, I kind of realized that actually I was putting way too much pressure on myself. I expected myself to be able to handle the OCD exactly the same way I would do normally, but that's just not realistic in these situations. Really, my brain was in survival mode and I needed to adjust my expectations accordingly. I wasn't getting the same sleep that I would do normally. I didn't have the same levels of energy that I would do normally. Once I actually took the pressure off a little bit, once I stopped trying to kind of win against the OCD, and instead I focused on just not making it worse, being a bit kinder to myself. I still had those intrusive thoughts, but they didn't quite feel so overempowering anymore because I wasn't telling myself that I had to be perfect, that I had to be managing it in just the right way. I actually allowed myself to struggle a bit more because actually I was a bit more tired, or I did have a little bit less energy than normal, and taking the pressure off in that way, well, actually it really helped. Another important point is when you're sick, your brain is literally running on low power. Your body is using all of its energy to fight that virus, which means that actually there's much less left over for the for managing your emotions and for regulating yourself. The part of your brain that helps you to manage your thoughts, that lets you step back and actually see things a bit more clearly, well, it's struggling, and that's why intrusive thoughts really do feel much more intense when you're sick. They're kind of meeting less resistance than they would do on a normal basis. On top of that, anxiety itself may actually get stronger when you're not feeling 100%. You may be experiencing fever, body aches, dizziness, and these physical symptoms, they actually mimic the anxiety symptoms themselves. And your nervous system is already on high alert. So when OCD thoughts actually pop up into your consciousness, they can feel much more urgent than normal, more real and more intense, and therefore it's easier to start believing them again. Then there's also the fact that sickness throws your routine completely off. As I was saying before, you can't do your normal workouts. You can't necessarily go socializing. Your sleep is probably going to be bad. And OCD thrives on lack of structure. When you can't do those normal habits that support you, then OCD sees this as a kind of opportunity to worm its way back in. And it's our job to make sure, even when we're sick, that we do our best to not allow that to happen, even if we don't quite have those habits in place. And yet another problem, particularly for those who struggle with health anxiety, is that you may already struggle with worries about illness and being sick. And of course, when you find yourself really struggling, with a sickness, of course, your mind is going to be spiraling and obsessing about those symptoms. You may be fearing the worst case scenarios, or compulsively checking Google to make sure that you don't have a given sickness or illness that obviously you really are hoping that you don't have. And that can exacerbate the OCD symptoms even more. So what can you actually do about it? How can you deal with the OCD in a better way when you're feeling like this? Well, here's a few things that have really helped me over the last week, and I think that they can actually help you too. First tip is to lower the pressure, and this was the biggest mistake that I think I was making last week. I was really expecting myself to handle OCD exactly the same way that I would do as if I was feeling fine and running and doing Wim Hof and all of that stuff. But when you're sick, it's just not realistic. It's just not possible. And actually, that's okay. If you're feeling sick right now, then your goal isn't to beat the OCD in this moment. It's to not make things worse. If intrusive thoughts are louder than they would be normally, remind yourself, this is temporary. My brain is just in overdrive because I'm not feeling well. And if you're too exhausted to challenge the OCD the way you normally would do, well, that's okay. Try to give yourself permission to do the best that you can today, despite the fact that, your energy is low and you're not feeling 100%. Even if you just take one small small step in the right direction. Well, that's positive. Maybe that's just delaying a compulsion for a few seconds. It doesn't matter, but try to recognize that any small steps that you take that are actually you dealing with the OCD, because actually that's a little win. And these little wins, even when you're not feeling 100%, they really do add up over time. Second, try using passive diffusion techniques. So when you're sick, your brain is kind of not 100%. Perhaps it's a little bit foggy. Complex strategies can really feel kind of impossible. So instead of complicating things, do your absolute best to keep it as simple as possible. When an OCD thought pops up into your head, instead of engaging with it, just name it. Rather than straight away trying to push it down or get rid of it, try saying to yourself, oh, there's my brain again. It's just trying to catch me out, and then move on to something else. And that's it. There's no deep analysis. There's no figuring things out. Just notice it, label it, and see if you can let it go. And you might be surprised that when you do that, it does begin to kind of move on. If your mind is really spinning on an OCD thought, well, maybe you can try just gently trying to redirect your attention onto something light and easy, like a TV show or an audio book. It's not about doing things perfectly. It's about just doing your best to try to direct your attention and to let go of that kind of OCD spiral, come back into the present moment. The goal isn't to block the thoughts out altogether. It's to allow them to come and go, but, to do your best to keep trying to refocus your attention onto something. Because actually that's a kind of form of acceptance. And at some point, when you keep gently redirecting your attention onto these activities, it can really help to just let go of some of those things. Maybe it will just bug you a little bit in the background, but at some point you may begin to forget about it if you keep refocusing back onto the present moment. The third tip is to take care of the basics. Now, I know this sounds obvious, but when you're feeling sick, even the smallest self-care habits can make a huge difference to how you feel overall. The number one thing to focus on is actually sleep. Even an extra 30 minutes can actually help your brain reset. So see if you can focus on that. Make sure that you stay hydrated and eat when you can. Blood sugar crashes can make anxiety worse, so that can be really helpful. If possible, see if you can get outside a little bit, get some sunlight or fresh air, even if it's just, sitting by an open window for a few minutes. And if you're too sick to do your normal kind of exposure exercises, try doing kind of micro moments of non-engagement with the OCD, trying to delay a compulsion for a few seconds or noticing a thought without actually reacting to it. These kinds of things, they kind of keep you going. They keep you focused on kind of, allowing a bit of uncertainty, allowing a bit of discomfort. Without forcing yourself to do your normal routine, without forcing yourself to, to have to do that really hard exposure today, because perhaps you're not just quite feeling up to it. And actually that's okay, but it is helpful if you can still keep doing something that does keep you moving generally in the right direction. So if you're dealing with this right now, if you're feeling sick and feeling like OCD is beginning to take over again, I want you to remember this. Actually, it's temporary. Your brain isn't broken. It's just exhausted from this virus. And, this isn't a setback. You're not losing progress here. Actually, setbacks, they are inevitable and inevitable part of the process anyway. And you just need to adjust your expectations. Focus on not making things worse and taking care of yourself, and that's all really. If you can, keep taking small little steps towards the OCD, trying not to push it away, but trying to approach it, trying to just feel a little bit of what you're experiencing by challenging yourself with very small exposure activities, not demanding too much of yourself, but by just gently pushing yourself still, taking care of yourself a bit more and trying to take the pressure off. you may be able to manage your OCD fairly well, even though you're not feeling 100% in this moment. Please do remember that I offer a free discovery call if you're struggling with OCD. You can get that by heading over to my website, robertjamescoaching.com. There's a link in the show notes, and you can also find my online course in the show notes as well. Currently, I'm offering 50% off for podcast listeners using the discount coupon BREAKFREE. So many thanks, and I will see you next time. This video is for educational purposes only and is not a substitute for professional mental health advice, diagnosis, or treatment. If you are dealing with OCD, anxiety, or any mental health concerns, please consult a licensed mental health professional for support.